Let's spend some time now looking at our swap file systems or our virtual memory. With our swap file systems, they can either be a swap file or it can be a disk partition. If it's going to be a disk partition, it's going to be of type 82. We can manage our swap space using the swap on command and the swap off command. So swap on we can use to display our swap space with swap on -s for summary, and swap off can be used to turn off swap space. We can also use swap on to turn on swap space, so either swap on -a, which will turn on all swap space listed in the FS tab file, or we could use swap on and then reference the partition or swap file that we want to use. We format the swap space with the mux swap, so whether it's a partition or whether it's a file. And what we're really doing here is just writing header information to say that this is used by our virtual memory system. There is no actual file system that is put on by mux swap, really just writing the header information as we mentioned. If we want to use a files for swap, then we can create that using the dd command, or more simply, if you have it installed, the fallocate command. These files should be owned by root and should have the permission set 0600, so they're read-writable by the user, who is going to be root, but they're not accessible to anybody else. So if we use sudo to create the file with fallocate, then it's going to be correctly owned by the root user. So here we're creating a 10 meg swap file. We just happen to be creating it in this instance in the /mnt directory and just calling it swap. Of course, you can put it in a location that's convenient and appropriate for your system. We can then mark it as in use by the swap file system, so using mux swap against the file mnt swap. We don't need to set the ownership because we created the file as root, so the ownership should be correct, but we will need to set the permissions if we haven't adjusted the default umask. So we can set then the file permission to 600, so read-writable to the user, and then we can mark it as in use or allocate virtual memory to it using the swap on command. Of course, this will be temporary if we don't mark it into our FS tab file. So let's take a look now at how we can use swap files within our file system. So working then back on the command line of my host, if we go through and take a look at our current swap space, so we can use swap on -s to go through and view that. So we can see then the information that's currently showing. We've got then one partition, and that partition will be a logical volume looking at this because it's a dev mapper device. We can use then either dd or we can use fallocate to create swap files as well as partitions. So we can go through and then say like allocate and then the size, so we'll go through and say we'll set up say 100 meg, and then we'll go through and then we'll just call it /mount/swap. Now I am root, so I don't have to worry about the ownership, but we can set up the permission, so chmod 600 for /mount/swap. So then using the mux swap command, we can go through and format this, or at least write the header. So we're going to write that through to the mount directory and then our swap file. With this all then set up, we can then go through and do a swap on and then put the path through to the file, so /mnt/swap. And now when we look at our summary, so swap on -s, we can see then that we've got the partition and the file in use. So we've got the combined space being available. This is also going to show when we run the free command. So if I run free -m, we can then see the free space that we've got available for swap. To be able to remove the swap, we can then use swap off and then /mount/swap. Now when we go through and look at the free command, we can see now we've reduced it by the space that we had, the 100 meg. So hopefully again this gives you a little bit of insight into using the virtual memory in Linux. Let's return to the slides now so we can tidy up the end of this module.